Oh, this is an interesting, different angle. I'm trying to position myself accordingly here. I'm not blocking too much, but okay. And now to do the proverbial sharing on the socials, since this is starting about an hour later than I initially anticipated, but that was because of all the joyful difficulties that come with having a new computer and having Google and two-way authentications and having like an old account associated with your personal YouTube channel, and then having all kinds of other like school Gmail for Arizona State, and then the business email with Enfuegotainment. It's just been there's a lot of stuff to take into consideration, but I am going to throw this in the Hail to Stephen King Facebook chat and a few other places. But yeah, guys, this is very exciting to be finally doing this. Let's get to the channel itself. And it's very nice to be on this set once again, because when I did the pardon moi, when I did the review of the recent book from old Stevie, Never Flinch, which you can find a review of on The Horror Show, which is the original destination for this show, for years and years and years at this particular point. But yeah, I did it on the Horror Show set, and we actually put it on the Horror Show as well, which, bittersweet, because we still haven't decided necessarily if we're actually going to move the show back over there now that I've graduated from Arizona State, or if we're going to just do something completely different. And it's live talking Chuck. Thanks, Steve and Mike. Yeah, that sounds fun. Keep it simple. Boom, bangarang. Losing ratings right now, I'm well aware. I just want to make sure that, because I was trying to do this, as I said at the very onset, for those who are starting to join, this is starting an hour late because I got a new computer when I was graduating. And for that sheer fact, I'd only used it really for like school related purposes and was using my older devices for any other things. But this is the first time I was like, okay, I want to actually check out the capabilities of the new camera. I want to just, properly break it in, so to speak. No pun intended. But yeah, so Face Beezy done. Do it on the Twitter X, as we call it at this particular point. Steve is still so incredibly defiant on all of the socials. I mean, he's back on Twitter X, which is kind of funny to me, because he deliberately left, and then he was like, I'm back, bitches, came back a few weeks later, or actually maybe it was more like a couple months later. But yeah, he just couldn't help himself, because he loves just riling up all of the, well, if you know King's political affiliations, you know what particular side he just loves getting riled up. But yeah, so he's back on there. Although from what I understand, at least, he does more with like Threads, and I think he does some Blue Sky. I'm on all of those socials, and when I do like a small review of some sort, I always try like spreading it around to as many things as possible. Like when I'm doing one of the Rapido Fuegos, which is essentially me just doing like a quick little short, and hail to Stephen King. So oh man, it's very nice to be typing that. Let's just do one more, select all. But I hope everybody has had a tremendous first half of your Junie. It's been kind of a crazy and chaotic one here in the States, but I don't have many stakes in the game for that. Corey, what up, my man? Good to have you stopping in, dude. Curious if you've seen this movie, because I'm going to be getting all spoilery with that shizzle. But okay. Where did it go? Yeah, big fan of this, and the fact that it's been like walking on eggshells trying to cover this, especially having read the short story, or the novella a little more specifically, because the novella, is like it's between a novel and a short. But Yeah, so that's definitely something that has to be. And I'll throw it on King's favorite, the threads. Put it in there. I found out recently with the Blue Sky that you can only put on, interestingly enough, Life of Chuck. Okay, cool. Yeah, on Blue Sky, you can't actually share videos. You can only share links to things, which is kind of interesting. So, what the hell, for all the very small contingent that utilize the Blue Sky, why the hell not? I want to get as many people checking this out as possible, because this is long time coming. Just like this film finally coming out was a long time coming. So now that I have done all of that, and since I see a few peeps filtering in, I see there's only a few watching, but hey, a thumbs up is most definitely appreciated here for Hale. But yeah, all right, guys, I'm gonna get a drink of the Gator Easy, and we will get it going. But yeah, very stoked. All right, everybody, because most peeps will end up watching this after the fact anyway. So okay, so to get the proceedings started out proper. Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower, yes, that one, as Jaime and Fuego. And if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That is Reezy, y'all. And so very stoked to have you here for the first one of these that I have done live in quite some time. Yeah, and when I was spending the last little over 2 years at Arizona State University and getting this film and media studies bachelor's that I completed last month in May, I did not get to do this program on just the consistent basis that I did for over 300 episodes over on the horror show. It migrated here to my personal channel, Enfuegotainment, where the only time I ever really did spooky shizzle was when it was something that Cecil had already covered with another member of our crew there. Or I don't know. I mean, just if I had the just hankering to, I don't know, do something spooktacular that Cecil, him and I, as dueling producers on the show and everything, didn't necessarily think was going to jive particularly well. But the plan is, not been settled upon as of yet, because we don't know if this channel is gonna, if this show is gonna remain here, or if it's gonna jump over back over to the horror show. But in any event, The Life of Chuck, which we are here to talk about today, which was originally published here in If It Bleeds back in 2020. Life of Chuck, in my estimation, is not a horror story. And a lot of people who have seen Mike Flanagan's adaptation that was released this past weekend in wide release, it was in limited the previous week, but yeah, this past weekend it finally went wide, which is cool. And so, yeah, it was not one, despite a few spooky elements sprinkled around. Most notably, you had some stuff in the third act of the film, which, for anybody who has seen this, I'm going to be going into full-on spoilers here in a little bit. But yeah, guys, it is one of those situations where there's a little sprinkling of some King horror in there, but there is not any massive abundance. Now, reading this book at the onset of the pandemic when it was released in May of 2020, yeah, it most definitely brought just some unease and a fearfulness, but it wasn't because of the fact that it was trying to be your typical full-blown horror. It was not that at all. And so anyway, lots of the horror outlets have been covering it, most notably because it's Mike Flanagan adapting Stephen King, and his previous two were definitely of the, Dr. Sleep, full-on horror, obviously, as being a sequel to The Shining and everything. But then the previous one there, being Gerald's Game, that's more of a thriller of sorts, grounded in a lot of ways, not really dealing with any sort of just otherworldly, psychotic craziness, nothing of that particular nature. But so, yeah, man, this is a story that meant a lot to me, even if it did affect me deeply when it initially came out. And so, yeah, let's just get right into The Life of Chuck and everything that this story epitomizes. So back once again, published as a part of the release If It Bleeds, which was 4 different novellas. And this was, the 4th, I believe, of King doing these different 4 novella collections. Because previously you had you had different seasons, then you had 4 Past Midnight, then you had Full Dark No Stars, and who can forget Hearts in Atlantis. So this is his fifth in that particular regard with If It Bleeds. And so I love this story when it initially came out, despite the fact that it was unconventional in its structuring. It is we're officially in spoiler territory for anybody who's jumping on currently. And so, full spoilers for both the book and for the movie. And so this story is told in reverse, but even differently than just being backwards. It's not like quite Memento in that regard, because of the fact that it is also told from in to out, a bit in out, anyways. But the thing about that is you start in the third act with, then that's where the book starts and where Flanagan's film starts. You begin in this third act, and the world is ending. There are all kinds of crazy things transpiring. We're talking about famines here, wars over there, earthquakes, and droughts, you name it, man. I mean, just all kinds of the things that are described in the Book of Revelation, in the good book, as being associative with the end times. These are all transpiring within this world, within a Stephen King is all about his world within a world sort of business. But it filled me with a lot of unease in 2020 when it felt like the world was kind of coming to an end of sorts because of what is happening to these characters. And then it did a similar thing with me when I watched the film at a screen unseen a couple weeks ago at AMC, where they previewed it for audiences. It was like around 2 weeks before it was actually going to be properly released and everything. And so, yeah, man, it was it filled me with a similar dread, a similar ominous sort of just abundance and it took me right back to 5 years ago during the pandemic and, all of that uncertainty. And so we're living in different times of uncertainty now, as some may, speculate, within other sorts of craziness going on in this country. I'm sure King would have a lot to say about it. I do not. But big thing is that what Flanagan does so adeptly with his work is that Flanagan is able, in a similar fashion to Stephen King, construct incredibly realized characters that are just wrought with nuance and emotion and just have spectacular depth to them. And I mean, with his first few feature films, Absentia, Oculus, Hush, things like that, he definitely embodied that. But I truly think that it was Mike Flanagan's Netflix work where he really honed these skills even further, because as opposed to having to condense this sort of these sort of character arcs within the runtime of a feature film, he had an entire series, like 10 episodes, to actually work all of this out. Still remember how wowed I was by The Haunting of Hill House when I saw his reimagining of that. An incredible ensemble, whether it was the younger versions of the kids or all of them grown up and coming back together and everything. Even beyond that, it just had it had such a sweet sincerity and yet like somber melancholy to it, which is what I think he made even better in something like Midnight Mass. That even as much as I love The Life of Chuck, I still contend that the crown jewel of Mike Flanagan's creativity is Midnight Mass. And there's something I'm going to come back to a little bit later in this review. But a lot of the themes of like our place in the universe and, discussions of what happens when we die and things of that nature. Flanagan was already exploring those sort of very philosophical and, just ruminative themes within Midnight Mass pretty extensively. And I think that's why when he read Life of Chuck during the pandemic, he has in interviews and things of that nature that he has said very plainly that The Life of Chuck spoke to him significantly when he read it, and he immediately wanted to adapt it. The issue was, and the reason it took 5 years for Flanagan to actually do it, was because somebody else had already scooped up the rights when the novella was first coming out, and it was none other than Darren Aronofsky. Yeah, one of my personal favorite filmmakers as well. Obviously, Requiem for a Dream, but just such a diverse sort of catalog in his filmography. I mean, Darren Aronofsky has done everything from Noah to Mother to the wrestler, Black Swan. I mean, that is a very creative dude, but he is kind of all over the place. And I don't necessarily know if his sensibilities would have really lent themselves quite as well to this story in the way that Mike Flanagan approaches not just his characters, but the structuring of his writing and his plotting with such empathy. And so, yeah, the rights lapsed. And of course, Mike Flanagan, as he has raised in prominence through his work on Netflix, I mean, House of Usher was well received. He has this first look deal going with Amazon currently. But yeah, based on that, he was, and also the fact that he has such a good relationship with Steve, he was able to scoop the rights up. And even though he had pretty much donuts for money to work with, man, as he has said in interviews leading up to the release of this, he was able to get a bunch of actors, most of which worked at scale. And he has this incredible cast that he assembled. They went down to Alabama. They shot it relatively quickly, but they could see based on Mike's script that this was a passion project and that it was something really significant that meant an immense amount for him to adapt. And it just spoke to him and his sensibilities. And I think if Darren had done this instead, Aronofsky being, this would have been a very different sort of film. Maybe it would have focused more so on the third act, which is presented at the beginning of this film, and the disaster aspect. But no, it doesn't do that. It focuses on the characters and how people are interacting with each other with all this shit going down around them, as opposed to focusing as much on that stuff. It is very dialogue driven, and I've heard a lot of people talk smack on Midnight Mass. Brother Payne, what's going on? Winston Smith. Yeah, Midnight Mass is still my absolute favorite thing that Flanny has done, man. But it would have probably been a very different sort of film, maybe less heavy on the dialogue, more heavy on the spectacle of it all, I guess. I'm just thinking of the way he approached the end of the world and the presentation of that in something like Noah, where he had a big budget for that. I don't hate on that movie as much as a lot of people, not even just because of my religious upbringing. But I think Flanagan was definitely the choice. But as I said in our non-spoiler review, this is not a film for everybody, in my opinion, not just because many might consider it schmaltzy or sappy or whatever. I don't know. I guess there are some with a more cynical nature that I think has been really hardened even more so. Like if it was already within your DNA beforehand, a lot that's going on in the world right now, regardless of your political affiliations, regardless of, your personal relationships or anything like that. I definitely believe that this is the sort of story, both in print and with the way that Mike adapted it, that is not going to be for everybody. The unconventional nature of it, with starting inward, moving outward, while moving backwards in that same regard, I don't necessarily think that is as... it's not really that hard to wrap your head around. I think it's those introspective themes that many just, I don't know, man. I don't know if it's because I did the extent of psychedelics in my 20s or whatever, but these are the sort of things that I have most definitely thought about extensively myself and still do, especially as I get older. What is your place in the universe? I think of a great Nevermore song where, I'm just a speck in the spectrum, insignificant am I. And yet, the counterbalance to that is something that is mentioned. It's the Whitman quote that is gone back to a number of times within this story, and obviously maybe focused on even more so in Flanagan's adaptation, is that I contain multitudes, and that, I can be brilliant, and people, deserve love, and they deserve to be happy because time is fleeting, and, life is nothing that is guaranteed to last a certain duration of time. And that's why I love this. That's why I love this movie so much, man. But yeah, so that first act about the apocalypse and everything, and what Mike does such a great job of with this is he focuses on what he does in comparison with the book, which is the one thing that I wanted to make mention of. So the book has your bits of dialogue here and there, but it does have kind of a third person narration within it, and so you still have someone great like Nick Offerman stepping in as the narrator for this. I see some peeps are jumping on. Davey, yo, what's going on, man? Winston Smith says, how do you feel about the Nevermore reformation? Yeah, side topic. I have major mixed feelings about it, but I love Jeff Loomis as a vocalist. I mean, Sanctuary, Loomis's former band, has already reformed with another singer. So, yeah, major mixed feelings about that. But Nevermore is like, fuck, man, one of my favorite bands ever, ever, ever. Warrell Dane wrote some killer lyrics, though. And so I don't necessarily know if with a new singer coming in for Nevermore, the possibility of that really just having the sound. I know that Van Williams is a terrific drummer. I know the musicianship will be incredible because of Loomis and Van Williams. It's the message and the lyrics, especially, that I have some reservations about. Corey says 100 pages left for Never Flinch. I've been really digging it so far. Right on, man. I had mixed feelings about Never Flinch. Wasn't the biggest fan. Isn't he supposed to do Cujo? Yeah, I actually I should have, with mentioning Darren Aronofsky, that he has been eyed by Netflix to do the Cujo remake, and then Flanagan is doing this Carrie reimagining. So we need more things like Life of Chuck, man, where it's something that's never been adapted. Give me fucking Revival or Doomakey finally, you know, something like that, or some of the other great short stories like The Jaunt. But, you know, can't have them all, and I understand that it's about recognizable, financially viable IP in this day and age. I saw Jose Storms is on. What's going on, buddy? But, you know, as far as like the greatest bits about what Mike Flanagan does, and also anybody who's been really successful in my estimation, like the Darabounts, for instance, you know, with stuff by Stephen King. And it's because of the fact that in those situations, they have typically been working with novellas, you know, like, you know, Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption by Darabont. That was a novella. You had The Mist, obviously, novella. The Green Mile ended up being almost full novel size, but like these were all shorter King things that had the ability to be expanded upon. And Life of Chuck is no exception to that, because, you know, also being a novella here in If It Bleeds, I mean, the great thing about it is Mike was able to, in my estimation, do what he also did with Dr. Sleep, and even to a not to a lesser degree as far as like quality, but to a lesser degree because I don't love the story of Gerald's Game as much as Dr. Sleep. But I think Mike Flanagan is now 3 for 3 as far as taking solid King source material. In the case of Life of Chuck, in my estimation, awesome King source material, and made it better. He made the Life of Chuck better, guys, at least for me, you know, because of the fact that all of the themes were here. And in fact, the movie, beat for beat, is almost identical in a lot of ways. I mean, down to like, you know, the little roller skater girl that Marty sees when he is about to finally meet back up with his ex-wife, Felicia. The sit down with the older gentleman, when Chiwetel's character Marty sits down with the older black character, and, you know, sits down, he's got his pipe and walks with him for a while. Also a big, great beat, you know, which is right here in the source material. The awesome scene, it's only one with Matthew Lillard, but it's another pivotal one that's in the book where, you know, Marty by Chiwetel Ejiofor is sitting down talking with this character about, you know, all of the things that are going on in the world, as far as like, he's like, this is the end. He points to this event and that event and that event, and this sinkhole that popped up, you know, in the damn city, and, you know, all these cars going down into it. And just, he gives a lot of exposition, granted, but it really does bring us up to speed. And it's a great scene between Matt Lillard and Chiwetel Ejiofor. And I just love the fact that Mike Flanagan sought out someone like Lillard, who showed such great dramatic chops in something like SLC Punk, man. And, you know, he's done his fair share of more genre-centric, you know, 13 Ghosts, and now he's picking up a nice paycheck for something like Five Nights at Freddy's. But, you know, I knew he's always had it in him, man. And so in any event, yeah, what Flanagan got to do, though, was hit the skeletal structure of all these great beats and all of these awesome themes that King explores within this, you know, these psychedelic, introspective, you know, what is my place in the universe sort of things. But it's a celebration, as I thought to myself before starting this video, I'm like, you know how people don't have funerals if they're trying to be more upbeat about it? It's like, it's a celebration of life, you know? And I was like, celebration of life of Chuck, and my celebration of not just the source material, but the amazing augmentation that Mike Flanagan got to bring to it, because even bits with like Chiwetel's teacher Marty at school, in the source material, the narrator just kind of glosses over it and mentions that, yeah, people at parent-teacher conferences were lamenting the loss of Netflix and, God forbid, Pornhub and stuff like that. But, you know, Flanagan gets to actually map out these scenes of dialogue between characters and expand upon them and just make them richer and better for that sheer fact. And I just adored that aspect of how he approaches his writing, and just what Steve gave him just the go-ahead and the clearance to really do with this. And so, yeah, the end of the first act, which is technically the third act as it's presented, it still gave me chills. And I loved the chemistry between Karen Gillan and Chiwetel Ejiofor, and about just that whole exploration of, well, you know, is it, you think right now we got more divorces happening at the end of the world, or more marriages happening, or remarriages in the case of Marty and Felicia. And so, yeah, that's kind of the way that I would imagine it to go down. People don't want to be alone. They want to be with familiarity, and they want the comfort of that as they know the clock is ticking. Another great thing that was added for this was not, which was not in the source material here, was the mention of like Carl Sagan and just the world's clock, and where humanity, at least according to science and everything. My parents on the Christian side would drastically disagree about something like this, but it was just fascinating to talk about how, you know, people, if we're going to go back to what science traces back to the beginning of the universe and everything, it is really it is down to when everything started, that was like January 1st. And now when humans popped up was like at the very end of December. So like even the arrival of humans was in like the twilight, like in like right before like the last ticking seconds of the final hour of the final day. It's really fascinating. And, that is and just an amazing addition and insight and just introspection that it was just like kind of not only greasing the gears, it was just adding more seasoning to a dish that was already pretty well prepared, but a very competent guy comes in and just makes a traditional dish that was already like riffing on it, in a unique fashion. He's like, okay, my mentor did this awesome variation on this particular plate, and I'm going to go with his ideas and where I think it could be tinkered with and made even better. And that's what Flanagan did. He made it even better, man. And the very end of Act 3, which is the first presented, third of this film, it still chilled me significantly, just as much when, the husband and wife have rejoined with one another and they're looking up at the stars and, they're having this romantic moment, but then the stars just start blotting out. And then it's like, oh, then the Big Dipper, boom, Big Dipper's gone. Oh, there goes Mars. There goes. And it's just such a chilling bit. And that is where both the audience and in the source material get the revelation about the fact that, yep, this is all taking place. It is a world within a world. It is a world that was constructed within, Charles Krantz' head, throughout the entirety of his life. And, worlds within worlds and these sort of psychedelic themes that I just adore the exploration of. And you get that revelation of that this is all happening within the, mind of this man on his deathbed. And that's where we get our first glimpse at Hiddleston, just like sitting there, on the machine and, the pit, pit, pit of the heartbeat and everything. And, 39 great years, get that confirmation and everything. And that's when, once you have that, that's when you get to actually explore a very tragic life of this character, because, despite the fact that it has a lot of uplifting themes in it, this is also a very sad story because, Charles Krantz, man, he has just one bad thing after another happen to him throughout, reaching back to his childhood, parents dying, and then, other family members and stuff. It's really tragic, but I'm just going to jump and check right here. Thoughts on the recent standalone reissue of Life of Chuck? Jose Storm says, I'm glad that they are presenting it. And at this point, they've put out a lot of those individual novellas in just, solo form. so to speak. But it's great for that story, which is hands down the head and shoulders best of these four. I'm glad that it's out there. I'm not going to repurchase it because I just can't warrant that sort of money when I already have my own copy of it here. I do like the dancing artwork from the poster on the very front. So it feels like a double dip, sure, but I know there's people who are going to see this movie and they're going to want to read the book, or in some cases want to read the book beforehand. I personally do not like reading a story beforehand because, especially in the cases of a lot of King's bigger things, there's a ton that's going to be condensed and omitted, and that irks people, myself included. It's different in this case where it's a shorter thing that can be expanded upon. So good times in that regard. So I can see the commercial aspect behind it, but it's going to bring this wonderful short novella to a whole larger audience. Corey's chiming back in. If anyone is a Matt Lillard fan, you have to check out his performance. It's a lesser known movie called The Animal Room. I think it's one of his best. Well, hell yeah, man. I mean, he's one of my favorite actors back to everybody knows, Scream, you stabbed me too deep, I think I'm dying. That's what I will. That was my first thing I think I ever saw him in. But yeah, man, he had a great singular scene in this. And that's the thing. There's a lot of characters from this very large, talented cast, Hiddleston included, that don't get a ton of screen time. This is very much an ensemble that is, celebrating its men. I'll give Cecil some love there with the DNN shirt. But yeah, it is very much that celebration of life, but also it's about perseverance in the fact that as we jump into, the second act, which is the one that has been shared so much in all the marketing materials, this epic dance that goes down, with Chuck and with this, mystery woman who has just been dumped by her guy. This is one where it's almost tit for tat, but seeing the dancing realized, I think, made the story even better because, they did such great choreography for that. It is a far more extended dance than I was anticipating. Hiddleston rules in that scene, man. Yeah, he's white boy dancing for sure, man, but it is still so endearing. And I mean, it's a cute moment. It really, truly is. And there's, excuse me, what? There's a great line at that particular point, which is in the book, and it's directly pushed into the film as well. And that's the thing. There's so much great dialogue in this. Flanagan really wanted to make mention of it. And I'm actually going to jump to it just to make sure that I don't. Narrowing is the natural order of things. That's one that just gets me every time. And the fact that, Chuck's character realizes that, like, straight up, he had to make sacrifices for things that he loves as he grew up. And so narrowing is the natural order of things. And it's something that kind of breaks my heart in the fact that I had to take time away from my band, from, even doing stuff on the horror show because I wanted to go back to school at Arizona State. But that is, the sacrifices of adulting. I don't even have kids. I can't even fathom the amount of things that I know I would have to sacrifice for family in that regard. Because if you become a parent, that is obviously like the most important thing in your entire life. That is your biggest job, obviously, for all of my friends who have kids, both of my little brothers, obviously, in that regard. So, but the one that I especially love, and it's where he's like, yeah, I became an accountant, as the Nick Offerman narrator is discussing all of what is, what Chuck is thinking about. And this is where it most definitely mirrors King's book in a lot of ways the best, I think, because if I recall correctly, Offerman's narration doesn't even pop up till the very end of the first third of the film when Act 3 is wrapping up. And then it becomes much more prevalent in the second and third part of the film, Acts 2 and 1. But Offerman's great. He has this very booming, timbre to his voice almost. I mean, he was the like voice announcer on the Oscars this past year, so that was interesting. But he's got the voice for it, man. And the second part, the middle, which is the middle of the middle, it's the only thing we get in according order in this film and in the short novella as well. Offerman does a great job of imparting the fact that Chuck, he speaks many languages, and he still feels like he does, even though the one he speaks the most currently at this time in his life, is accounting. But he's like, I still think I speak those other languages, albeit, some of the vocabulary is kind of faded away over time. But, the language he obviously still speaks is that of dance and just his love for just exuberantly like letting it out, man. And just, and he has a blast of a time. I mean, minor little thing, they changed the drummer from a guy to a girl in this, but she rips on it, man, from one drummer to another, and me being more of a punk and metal drummer, she is shifting, as they describe in the book and as you see in the film, between all sorts of different styles, man. I mean, she goes from swing beats to like some reggae stuff. She's all over the place, things that I don't particularly like to play, but like the most skilled drummers can jump all over the place. Bonham had all kinds of different, like he hated playing shuffles, on like on different stuff when Jimmy Page wanted him to play them, but he just kind of rolled with the punches in that regard. But yeah, the drummer girl kicks ass in it. Dance sequence is just, it's beautiful, and you can tell that a lot of love was put into it. I see a name that I haven't seen in one of these in a while, because I haven't done one of these in a while. Daniel Corey, man, what is going on? I'm looking forward to this flick, but I'm really looking forward to The Long Walk. The trailer was great. Yeah, man. The Long Walk trailer kicks ass. It is chilling. I haven't watched the Hunger Games stuff, but according to a lot of people that I've spoken about this film with, they're like, yeah, he was a great director to choose for this. He has experience in this sort of like deathmatchy sort of stuff. And man, like the trailer captured the tone, and they have a great cast of younger actors. The dude who was in the recent Alien movie, who I think is playing one of the main characters, Philip Seymour Hoffman's son, is in this. Ken, oh God, his name, is it Ken Yang? Anyway, he's in the new Karate Kid Legends. I've heard he's quite good in that. I haven't made much time to see that because I haven't watched Cobra Kai or anything. I don't know how much it may tie into that, but Ken is quite good, and he's fun in the trailer. I mean, they have an awesome ensemble, and the writer of Strange Darling adapting the screenplay, man, that is really exciting. So great assembly of talent, man, and the fact that we're getting even another Bachman with November in The Running Man, it's pretty exciting stuff. And Daniel follows it up with, regarding the novella, I wish King added like 3 more vignettes to the story. It could have been an all-timer for me had he done so. It was great, but felt incomplete. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I can certainly see that. Flanagan expands upon each of the 3 sections pretty well. The middle section that I'm on currently is the one that he keeps pretty much the truest. I mean, he keeps true to the source material throughout and just expands upon it. But yeah, maybe a couple more beats within Chuck's life, I think. King was going 3-act structure, beginning, middle, and end. But I think it could have been, especially with how much I love the sensibilities of this particular story and how it spoke to me about, place in the universe and, things that I have ruminated upon, man. Yeah, I could have seen this being a full novel. But yeah, King felt it was complete enough. And I guess I respect that. But yeah, it is an all-timer novella that I agree, Daniel, could have definitely been expanded into something bigger. Okay. Oh yeah, Dan. Yeah, Long Walk is my most anticipated. Yeah, it looks kick-ass, guys. Totally capturing the mood. Fascination is Fear's twin brother. There's another great bit that King says in the book that I don't think actually made its way to the film, but it's where Chuck is telling, and the narrator is just reiterating this, but Chuck is telling this girl in high school about how he feels like he's the main character in this story and everything, and the girl is like, and why would you think you're a main character in anyone's story? It's this like cynical, artsy chick that he was dating in college, and then the narrator even mentions, the relationship only lasted a semester, but that's because Chuck's character seems to just have, back to my phrase from earlier, a sweet sincerity about him, especially as we get to the third part of the movie, which is the first act. And in some ways, this is one that I found significantly more endearing than the first time I read the short story, because I liked the Chuck stuff as a kid, but Mike Flanagan just brought so much more life to it. And I think that's because he's, a parent of younger kids right at the moment, whereas Steve, having grown, children, around the time that he was writing this and everything. I mean, it really, really hit hard because you were informed that, Chuck's parents died when he was very young, and then he moved in with his grandparents and everything. But that's where this really enriches the third portion of the book, because Act 1, which is the final part of the presentation in the novella and in the film, obviously, I liked it, but I didn't absolutely love it, especially when King tries to interject a little bit of the supernatural with, what is going on up in the attic, and, just the capability that it has to show like someone's demise, and, how it has affected Chuck's grandfather and everything, and, how he had seen other people within the town die. And then later, he sees his wife die, and then later on he sees his own demise, so it is very prophetic and, very much about the waiting and all of that stuff. But, it was made so much better by Flanagan in this, because scenes that are just briefly described, we actually see them extendedly play out. Most notably when Chuck is starting to dance with his grandmother, and I forget the name of the actress. I want to double check, but I know she was in Ferris Bueller, and she hadn't acted in like a decade. Oh goodness, Mia Sara, yeah, that's her name. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Still quite pretty, even as a grandmother, still quite pretty and everything. But just seeing like the little strip of gray going down. But she has such warmth within her interactions with Chuck. I mean, they're dancing and just, sitting on the couch. And even though it is like kind of a montage of sorts, like seeing it all playing out, and with such great chemistry between this young little actor, Benjamin, I just want to double check on his name, Benjamin Pajak. I don't know if he's done anything before this. I didn't search out IMDb, but he doesn't have anything on Wikipedia that I can link up to. That kid is stellar in this movie. He is exceptional in my estimation, man. And he brings just so much complexity with his like mannerisms and everything, and especially with his facial expressions when he is both happy, but also in scenes of being inquisitive, when Mark Hamill, as his grandfather, starts for the first time talking about the ghosts up in the attic. And man, alive, Mark Hamill, man, goddamn, he's so good in this. And, especially how they kind of amplify the drinking aspect of him a little bit within this, as Flanagan's just like King being, a recovering alcoholic and everything. But, it doesn't feel like quite as cold. And not that it was like full on cold in the novel, but it just didn't really have the full spectrum of both grief and also just the love and the compassion that, he still has for his grandson after his wife dies, because that is the second big tragedy that befalls Chuck, is that, he's been brought out of his shell a bit by this love of dance, and the fact that he joins the twisters and spinners at school and everything. And he's starting to do this, and he's starting to just get some admiration from some of these other kids in school, most notably the older young lady that he starts dancing and everything with, who's like an 8th grader and stuff. But, Hamill is exceptional in this. It's one of the best things aside from Skywalker as far as like dramatic pathos and stuff. And, and he's also in The Long Walk, as I'm sure you guys have seen from the trailer. So, he's doubling down on the Psy King this year, which is really, really exciting. But he is exceptional as the grandfather, and he has a tremendous monologue in this movie, which is another thing that is not in the book that Flanagan brought to the table. And it's essentially after the grandma has passed and everything, and he sits and he's like addressing Chuck, and he's telling young Chuck, like little, like 5th, 6th grade Chuck, about the fact that math essentially is part of everything in this world and everything within the universe. And it's everything from, the bookkeeping that I'm doing that, helps people, maintain their businesses and not fall underwater, about the fact that it is used in medicine, about the fact that it is used in astronomy. I mean, he has this extensive, he is definitely trying to recruit Chuck to be in this sort of field. And lo and behold, he obviously convinced him to, turn away from dancing and to go and, become an accountant and everything. So the message obviously rang very true and very clear. But another great thing that is brought to the table by Flanagan in this is that I feel like the bits with the attic that I thought a little forced and unnecessary in the source material, it is brought together much more significantly with like the resounding theme of the entire film, and even just ascension of the storytelling in a lot of ways. And that is, knowing your time is short, and the waiting may be the hardest part, but it is also just, it's why you need to really just embrace the joy and the goodness. And then, a lot of people say, yeah, then sappy, whatever, and melancholy, so on and so forth. And, I don't know, call me a sucker for that sort of stuff. And, King is notorious for it. Flanagan has done it countless times. But, the exploration of the themes in this, really backtracking to Midnight Mass, there's a scene, I believe it's episode 6, where the guy who is he's the kind of love interest, I guess, of Katie Siegel, or not Katie Siegel, her name is eluding me. Flanagan's wife, who he puts in everything, Kate. We'll just say Kate, because I'm like, oh, Katie Siegel, that's Married with Children and Sons of Anarchy and so many other things. I just saw her at Comic-Con this past weekend. But anyway, so Kate has a great monologue with the guy who was the drunk driver, who is back in his hometown, and they're talking about the two different perspectives of what happens when you die. And the drunk driver, recovering alcoholic guy, sits there and talks about how all of the cells in his body start shutting down, and he's talking about the brain being the last thing going, and eventually he may see different life flashing before his eyes, as some people describe it as, or whatever, but and then it pivots over to Katie's perspective, and hers is her religious background injecting itself, and about being in heaven and seeing her unborn child. And it is these extensive bits of dialogue between each of them, very very heavy-handed monologues. But I like heavy-handed when there is a depth to it, and there is an artistry to it, and when there is exceptional delivery and performance behind it. And that's what you get in various parts of this film. And the third act really does tie up these themes of I contain multitudes, and the fact that you can spend your entire life with every single thing you see. It forms like a little piece within your head, and an entire universe is constructed within your brain over the course of it. Some may think it's a little too out there. It's whatever, but art is subjective, and I totally respect if that's how you feel. But this one just really speaks to my sensibilities, the things that I still contemplate constantly, especially in the midst of aging. And, it's a very special movie. You can tell that it was made with such care, such consideration. And Mike Flanagan, man, I mean, he is just the shiznito bam when it comes to Steve stuff. Really wish he could have been able to make Revival, but, it kind of is what it is in that particular regard. But that is, I really wish this film had found a bigger audience at the box office. It's kind of peculiar to me the way Neon went about releasing this, because last fall when this debuted at the Toronto International Film Festival, for anybody who doesn't know, whatever, I'll just reiterate it. But it won the Audience Award. It beat out stuff like The Brutalist and, others that went on to Best Picture nominations and all these other things last year. And so it didn't find its distribution during the fall, so it wasn't able to be released during that award cycle. The films that win the Audience Award, like the last 9 or 10 of them or something like that, have gone on to at least be nominated for Best Picture. So we're talking some names that come to mind. I know La La Land was nominated. I know The Fabelmans was nominated. I don't think Fabelmans ended up winning anything. Others like Belfast. I mean, it's a lengthy list that I don't have directly in front of me, but we're talking these films that win the Audience Award are always in big contention at the Oscars for the last decade or so. It is like a big time stamp of approval for, when award season officially begins. But it didn't secure distribution, and I think Neon was probably a little more focused on the Anora push and everything like that. But when they acquired this, a lot of people were surprised that they were putting out in summer. as opposed to holding it off until like Neon has 2 Best Picture winners at this particular point between Anora, which I wasn't too big on, but Parasite from 2019 that I was huge on, the Bong Joon-ho. Excellent film, darkly comedic drama. But released both of those in October. And there was so much critical speculation that they were going to keep this a little closer to the vest and they were going to hold off on it till the fall because of all the accolades that it had received when it was kind of making its way around the festival circuit before they acquired it. A very odd spot for them to put it here in early June, and perhaps they're thinking that critics will still remember it, like months and months and months, like I mean, what, the Oscar nominations come out like 8 or 9 months from now. So that's where I just kind of wonder if this film is going to stand the test of time as it marches towards, next year's awards, or if it's going to kind of fall by the wayside and be forgotten. I think that would be really tragic if that is the case, because of the fact that this film deeply affected me. I loved it. Once again, I know it's not for everybody. I know it may be considered just, a little schmaltzy or sappy or whatever, terms that I've used quite a few times without, throughout this broadcast. But I don't know. It really worked significantly for me, spoke to me. And just the endearing message of perseverance and stopping to smell those proverbial flowers, or just have a random dance in the middle of nowhere. And just near the end of the film, when little Chuck is standing and just staring up at the stars, and you see like the pinks and everything up in the sky and everything. It's gorgeously filmed, and Flanagan was able to do quite a bit with a very small budget, and he did a lot with a little in this. Just like Chuck's character is like the little guy that could, and just like stuck with it, and in the face of all this adversity, still kept chugging along and loving and, seizing the moment and enjoying life and everything, and observing everything, and just being so cognizant and allowing not to what is the word that I'm looking for? It's like back to that phrase of narrowing. Like, you kind of get the feeling that this character never really completely narrowed it. And, despite, getting married and having a son and all these other things, he never completely narrowed it. He still stayed in tune to so much around him, which is why such a rich universe was able to be built within his head. And I know some fellow reviewers have been like, they went way too heavy with the promotions at Neon with, greatest King adaptation ever, magnificent, life-changing, all these different things. I think that when people enjoy a movie greatly, they, especially in this critical age where it's either you adore something, to the highest of heavens, or you fucking hate it and you just want to take a big dump on its face or something. It has to be these two extremes, and is one thing that I really dislike about online punditry in a lot of ways, a lot of the time, because I did, with all the way back to my journalistic training and on the school paper, and then when I first started out at Arizona State before dropping out and studying audio production instead, only to go back and study film and media stuff, so things kind of coming full circle. But you are supposed to approach things, if you're like a true journalist, with some essence of objectivity. And for me, those are the differences between critics and journalists, and then also entertainment correspondents, which are something completely different. But in this digital day and age, everybody has an opinion, but I think you need to be just a little more like perspectived, perspectives, if I'm going to, quote Tim Meadows from SNL. But yeah, just give things a little more just like full perspective, as opposed to just focusing on one thing and gushing, because I feel like a lot of the stuff that, those pull quotes that were all over the posters for Chuck were perhaps raising a very, very unbelievably high level of expectation for some of these journalists and critics, and even viewers in many ways, because people that I really, some of my contemporaries, some people that I look up to who have a much bigger reach than me, in the sphere, I saw some of them that I really thought were going to love this movie to the degree that I did, not being quite so into it. They were like, oh, it was good. I liked it quite a bit, but, all the praise is a bit much for it because, once again, the burden of expectation. And I say this all the damn time on the horror show and when I get the chance here on Enfuegotainment. So, perhaps they were just a little bit heavy-handed in the marketing. And also the fact that everybody thought Hiddleston was going to have a bigger role. And for those who watched the film and realized, oh, he's in like maybe 20-something minutes of it, it is the life of Chuck. And that's why the poster that I used for the thumbnail here was the final poster that they put up, where you see the 3 different versions of Chuck. Now, Tremblay's in the movie for like 5 minutes. So if you're going to complain and, gripe and stuff about Hiddleston's presence, Tremblay was in even less than that. So that, Tremblay is still good with the very, very tiny little sliver that he gets at the end of the movie. But, it's very cathartic where he finally gets up to the cupola or whatever they called it, the attic essentially, and he does see his demise right there, and he sees that, he realizes it's himself when he notices the scar, but he's like, since I don't know, I can't recognize myself because it is a 39-year-old man who has aged so significantly, from the cancer and everything. And so you just don't know. And he's like, you know what? Even though I have seen it, I'm not going to be burdened with, the pain of waiting and, that being the hardest thing. I am just going to, keep my head down, but keep observant of everything and everyone around me, keep constructing my universe within me. And I just love that sort of mentality. It's something that even with trying to focus so damn on, going back to college, which was a lot of fun. And I'm looking into pursuing this master's at this point in the film and media program. But, still, it's like you have to really just not be so tunnel visioned, I guess, is what I'm looking at. And so, yeah, this movie is a big time recommend for me as I'm about to hit the hour mark. And that was around where I was going to, cut it off at. Okay. Yep. Mia Sarah, Daniel, Corey even, hit me before. Major childhood crush for me too, man. Oh, Nelly. Yes. Oh, so pretty. But anyway, guys, I feel like I've, got the message across about, how much I am a big time, fan of this film. It only made a couple million at the box office this weekend. Most of the critics still seem to like it. So perhaps that will have enough weight to, push it into the awards season for consideration and things of that nature. But, bottom line, excuse me, Flanagan got to make another King passion project that he put so much life into, that he made better, that he augmented and improved upon the source material. And there are very, very, very few King adaptations of, the myriad of them that we have had for both television and for film, both the big screen and the small screen, that can really say that they've done that. I mean, I don't even know, as much as I love Rob Reiner and, maybe Misery, but I love Stand By Me. I still think The Body is a little bit better within its source material, with a lot of the sentiments, that are just, gone over and over into the introspection, within that. That's a very melancholy book as well. I mean, King still returns to these themes because I think as you age, they just become more heavy on your heart. And this film is most definitely going to be sitting in mine for a long, long time. And I can't wait to add a physical copy of it, to the shelf of all my King films and television and stuff. But yeah, guys, unless there are any of the viewers that are still chilling, I guess that is going to be the end of the proceedings, as I am just about to hit 1 hour on the DZ. But Life of Chuck, I definitely recommend checking out the source material, whether you pick up the new release that has been put into the bookstores and whatnot. They also have it individually as an Audible. The audiobook is excellent, whether you get it in If It Bleeds, the full collection, or just separately as Life of Chuck. Great source material, but this is one of the few times where great source material by another great artist was elevated, at least in my estimation. So I extend a grande gracias for anybody who tuned in here on the live broadcast. Corey, my buddy, Brother Payne, Davey Deathray, who stopped in for a brief moment, Jose Storms, Daniel Corey, name that I hadn't seen in a moment. So it was really real nice pleasure to see you guys stopping through. But I would imagine a lot of constant viewers and readers will be checking this out after the fact, because I had the initial time that I was trying to do, and then technical difficulties with setting up a new computer and trying out this new setup and whatnot. That caused some issues, but very stoked that I finally got to do this, because it was like walking on eggshells trying to review this movie, because I want anybody who has not read the novella beforehand to go into this as blind as possible. If you've made it this far, that is definitely what I recommend. And yes, I send a grande gracias. I've been Jaime Fuego. You can find Wall on all social media sectors. I'm being done with school now. I'm trying to have a little bit more of a presence there. Twitter, X, whatever the hell we're calling it now. Facebook, obviously. I'm Instagrammies. I'm on the threads. I do a little bit on the Tiki-Talkies. It's pretty much all just, Rapido Fuego, little short film reviews and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think that pretty much covers all of the proverbial bases, guys. So it's going to do it until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more. Hasta luego, sin amigos, constant readers and viewers alike. Say thank you. I'm hopeful we share more of this palaver sooner rather than later. And I guess I will always finish it off with the typical horror show. Leave it in the comments below what you guys thought of this film and what you think of the source material if you have read it. So always, until next time, stay scared. Yep, because we will always say that both here and on the horror show when we're covering King. And read Stephen King, obviously. But in this case, go watch Stephen King, because Mike Flanagan is a hell of a job at adapting. Laters, y'all. Peace.